Hi, this is Steve. Welcome to the Hard Times Cafe. Today we're going to show you how to make apple pie from scratch, homemade apple pie. A friend of ours gave us a big old can of restaurant tried fancy sliced apples and syrup. Now I made one of these the other day. It turned out pretty good. I'm getting ready to make another one. I got a little less syrup left. We're down to the bottom of the can. Got approximately 4 cups of these apples. I've sliced them further so that they're in sections about 1-inch cubes rather than the long slices. Because I don't have as much syrup in this as I did last time, I'm going to make my own syrup, which I also did last time. I used some of the syrup that was there, but we're going to go ahead. We're going to add 1 cup of water. We're going to add about 3 cups of sugar. About 2.5, 3 cups. That's about right. Alright. We're going to add 1/4 stick of margarine. I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of cinnamon. 1, 2, 3. Add 1 tablespoon of ground ginger. We add 2 tablespoons of ground cloves. Now you might want to use 1 tablespoon, depending on how much you do or do not like cloves. I like them. This is almost essentially, except for the nutmeg, which we're not adding here, pumpkin pie spice. If you're making a pumpkin pie, you would add nutmeg. I'm adding, like I said, 2 tablespoons this. Now, I'm going to stir this up good. Then I'm going to put it on the stove and bring it to a boil. Alright, so we're going to stir this up. Alright, now we're going to stir this up really good. You're going to get a brown, spicy looking sauce there. Don't worry about that butter, it's going to melt in when we start cooking. Cloves really make it, but you want the cinnamon in there and the ginger as well. I'm going to turn this on high. It starts boiling. I'm going to let it boil for a couple minutes. And I'm going to stir it. I'm going to stir it for about 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and it's going to start getting thicker and thicker and forming a syrup. And as it does, we'll show that to you. We'll come back and show you that then. Be back in just a minute. Hi, this is Steve. This is Hard Times Cafe. We're making homemade apple pie from scratch. We're back. Before we left, we had just put our apple mixture on the stove and set it to boil. Now it's been boiling for about 4 minutes. You can see this mixture. Now we're not going to use all this syrup. We're going to use some of it, but we want it. What we don't use, we can use for other things or just discard. Now this syrup, when it starts boiling, it's going to get thicker and thicker. It's not going to get real thick, but it'll get a thicker consistency than water. You want to turn this down. Actually, I'm going to turn this on down to about 1, just above simmer, or just above low. I'm going to let this simmer for about another 4 minutes. Now I brought it to boil, let it boil for about 4 minutes. I'm going to let it simmer for about another 4 minutes, and then I'm just going to cut it off and let it cool for about 30 minutes, and then we'll be ready. I'm going to let it cool for about 30 minutes after I turn it off, and then we're going to be ready to make our pie crust and fill our pie crust. Hi, this is Steve, this is Hard Times Cafe. We'll be back. We're back. We're making homemade apple pie in this episode, and our apples are all cooled off. You can see the syrup is nice and done. The consistency is just a little bit thicker than water. And again, we're not going to use all the syrup. What we are going to do is make the crust now. You want 2 cups. Your ingredients are going to include 2 cups of flour. Now you can use all-purpose flour. I choose to use self-rising flour because it makes flakier crust. You're going to want a teaspoon of salt, 1 stick of butter, and you're going to want 8 to 12 tablespoons of water. Now what I got here is 8 tablespoons in this glass, and I got another 4 on hand here. Of course the sink's over there in case I need it. And you're going to need, now ideally you'd want a large wood cutting block and a wood rolling pin to roll out this dough. I don't have that, so what I'm doing, I'm just taking a large baking pan that's big enough I can roll out a 9-inch pie crust on, and I've just kind of floured it here, alright, so that the dough, when I get it formed, won't stick to the pan. That dry flour, it'll stick to that dry flour instead. Now, I'm going to pour my flour in first, and then we're going to take this butter, and you want a dough cutter, or you can use a butter knife. I don't have a dough cutter particularly, so you can just use a butter knife, and you want to take and cut the butter into the flour. Now since I don't have a dough cutter, what I'm going to do is just cut a whole bunch of little slices. I'm going to go through this stick, and I'm going to make a whole bunch of little slices here till I get them in here. This is not what cutting the butter is. I'll show you what cutting the butter is in a second. But I need it like this because a dough cutter would do this in the bowl. And you're gonna cut it into the flour is what the process is called. Okay. Now what you'll do is you'll take and just start stirring this in. This is cutting the butter in. I have all these slices, and what will happen is little clumps will form with the butter. It'll start forming a whole bunch of little dough-like clumps. That's cutting the butter in. Now you can use, if you want, approximately 2/3 a cup of shortening in place of the butter, or you can use half a stick of butter and the other half, about 4 tablespoons of shortening, maybe 6 tablespoons for a different flavor. This will be a good flavor though. This makes a nice crust. Now once I get that cut in pretty good and I got a whole bunch of these little clumps in there, I'm going to go ahead and add my tablespoon of salt, or my teaspoon of salt rather, and I'm going to add 8 tablespoons of water here. Now I'm going to start stirring this up until a dough forms. At this point I will want a fork. Sorry about the dogs there, they're ready for supper too. Alright, now I want to take about 80%, maybe 85 to 90% of the flour that's in this bowl should form into a large dough ball. If I got more than that in dry flour, more than 10 to 15%, like there, I still got about 1/3 of dry flour, then I'm going to need to add some more water. So you kind of just got to get a feel for this. You want to save a little bit of dry flour, just a little, not a lot, just enough to coat the outside of the dough ball. And I'm still going to need a little more. But you can see I'm forming a dough ball now. Just a second. Adding about, maybe another 4 tablespoons there, that might have been. There we go. Alright. So altogether I probably got about 2/3 a cup of water in here. Alright. But you want to start and add the water in increments. Now my dough ball's forming. Okay? We're about ready to get in business here in a second. What I'm going to do, this will yield approximately 2 9-inch pie crusts. I have a foil 9-inch pie pan here. Now since we're making homemade apple pie, I'm going to need both crusts for the pie because I'm going to have a top crust. So I'm going to cut this in half. I can actually, now that I've floured my pan, I can shake this excess flour off in here. For this process, you may want to keep some extra flour on hand. And I'll show you why. You can always pour what you don't use back into your flour container. Reason being, I don't have a rolling pin, so I'm going to use a can of corn. And what I'll do is I'll make sure there's just enough flour on the bottom of this pan, get my hands in it now, so that this doesn't stick to the pan. And I'm going to take and roll this around. I poured some of that dry flour in there. I'm going to roll it around until I get a dry coat on the outside, and then cut it in about half. Take about half the mixture there. Now I have 2 dough balls, one of which is going right here. I'm going to start rolling it out here. Okay? Now, you're going to want some more flour on your surface because you don't want it sticking to your surface. If you've got a wood cutting board, this is a lot easier, especially if you've got a wood rolling pin to go with it. Now, I don't want this sticking to the label, and this is clean, so I just powder the outside with flour. Okay, get this into about the middle, start rolling it out. If it starts sticking to the can, peel it off, add you a little more dry flour to your can. Okay, a little more dry flour to the surface. This is why you want the extra flour here. Of course, if you got a rolling pin, you probably won't have all this hassle. You can pull some of this flour and put it on the top. It'll help just as much as adding it to the can. You're going to do this process twice, once for the bottom crust, once for the top crust. Now, I'm going to fold this over and get this powder on the bottom here, because I'm getting ready to start rounding it off. It's going to start. Okay. Now once I get this all out, I'll take this into, make my bottom layer here and form it. Just kind of pull it up, and we're going to repeat the process, forming this flour right in the pan. Kind of center it out. I'll start pushing it up, kneading it to the sides. Now, so it doesn't stick to your fingers, again, a little dry flour here. It's not going to hurt anything in the final taste. It'll, when the juice from that apple gets in there, it's going to, you'll never know. You never know. This is just kind of keep it from sticking to your hand. See how I'm pulling that crust up onto the rim there? I'm just kind of kneading it around. Now, I'm worried about this rim first. I'm not going to worry about the bottom. See how it's pulling thin in there? I'm not worried about that. I'm just getting my rim first. Getting my rim and my walls and my pie crust. I can kind of squeeze that. Once I start squeezing around, some of that will come back into the center, and I can squeeze it down into the bottom. Okay. Alright, there we go. Now, I got a nice, you want to make sure your top crust has a little ridge to the inside, and you want to have it beveling over the top by about 1/4 to 1/2 inch all the way around the side there. It's a little messy, but the end result's worth it. Okay. So I'm pushing this up and down with my finger. I'm pushing it up to the rim and pushing the excess back down to the bottom. All at the same time. Just working it with my finger up and down against this wall. Okay. Start sticking to your hand. A little flour. Okay. There we go. Now, see what's happening? See how this is starting to pinch back into the middle? Now I'm just going to take a little bit of my dough here from what I'd use top, because you'll have some left over. Put it in the center and start working it out. And it'll all adhere back together. Okay? But you don't want it too thick on the bottom, because you don't want a biscuit for the bottom of your pie crust. Alright? But you want to get nice and even all the way around. Alright. Now that is looking good. Okay. Now you're ready to add your apples. Yeah. Now, before we do though, we're going to go ahead and roll out the rest of this. So once the apples are ready, we're ready to start working with the top. Alright, so I'm going to roll out this top layer and add some flour so it doesn't stick to the can. Flour my can as well. Now, all I want here is a nice even thickness, because I'm getting ready to cut this into strips. Because now you can make a uniform, you could just take this top right here and add straight to it and mince it into the edges. I don't want to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this into strips and make a lattice top. Before I do, I'm going to come back around the side and take my finger and make indentation. Indentation. I'm going to make indentation, skip a finger. Indent a finger, skip a finger. That's your distance. Indent a finger, skip a finger. All the way around. Okay. There we go. Now, I'm going to cut this into strips. Okay. About 1 inch wide, 1/2 inch, more like 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch wide. Now, before you start this process, you want to preheat your oven to 375 degrees. Now remember I said we're not going to use all this syrup. What we want is apples. It's an apple pie, not a syrup pie. So we want to scoop as much of the apples out, all the apples first. And then when we're through, we'll add what syrup we need. You'll get some as you scoop. Here we go. This is I like it. This way I can get the apples and the longer you cook those apples in that syrup, the darker they're going to get. Okay. Get them all out. Now, we've got about a cup and a half of syrup left in here. All our apples are in the shell. We want about 4 cups of apples total. I actually only had about 3 and a half. Well, 3 and a half to 3 1/4. So I'm making up with some of the syrup, and it'll cook into it, cook out. I don't need it all though. Got about a cup and a half of syrup left over. Now what I'm going to do next, I'm going to take my strips, just kind of like dumplings. You know, you want to get your strips. These are actually rolled out a little thin, so all you got to do is just put it back, press it out again. I'm going to press this out with my hands this time. I can see what I'm doing a little more till I get it about the distance, the coverage area of a 9-inch pie shell, the top there, and that's about it there. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to make it a little wider though, because I need straight edges on the edges. I'm going to cut off this first edge. That's not going to get used. Okay, not now anyway. Then I'm going to just cut out little dumpling size strips. Okay. I'm going to do all my rows one way first. Now, there may be another way to make this lattice top, but this is the way I do it. Alright. Now, so I'm going to get all my 1 rows first. Now, next, I'm going to do the other rows, and what I'm going to do is not actually weave this, but give the illusion that I have. So, I'm going to cut this long strip in about half there. I'm going to come across here, peel just in. See what happens? I'll take that little extra, make a patch on top of that. Then I'm going to come across here, peel this up just a little. Okay. Now, gonna take this one again, break it in about half. Gonna come in now. This time, I'm gonna start here in the middle. See? And I'm gonna give the illusion. I'm gonna peel it in. Take a little patch of dough here and kind of seal that up so that they cook right in together. Then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to come here, right over, push it into the edge. Now, here, I'll take this little piece of dough I got here and just stick it right here so that strip's thing going over. And this dough will adhere to the other dough as it's cooking. And then on this side, back over again. Alright. Now, you'll want to take and patch these edges in such a fashion so that the top part of your lattice aesthetically looks best. Now, that's not bad. That's probably about it right there. I'm just going to put a little patch of dough right there, and we are ready to put this in the oven. Alright, again, this is going to go on the center rack. Oven's preheated to 375, and it's going to cook till the crust is golden brown. You kind of want to have to watch it, but approximately start out about 25. It's going to be 25 to 30 minutes, maybe 35 minutes. So you're going to set your timer. you'll be good for 25 minutes for sure. When you come back in 25 minutes, check it then. I would turn on the light in the oven, and we'll come back in a few minutes and see how our pie turns out, and then after it cools, we'll have a slice. I'm Steve. This is the Hard Times Cafe on YouTube. We'll see you soon. Alright, hi, this is Steve. This is the Hard Times Cafe on YouTube. We're back. We're making homemade apple pie today. Now, when we put our pie in the oven, we put it in. The oven was preheated at 375 degrees. We set our oven for 25 minutes. When the 25-minute timer went off, I came in here and checked. It wasn't quite done yet, so it's been going about another 11 minutes now. It's been about, and it's done at this point. We're ready to take it out. It has been a total of about 36 minutes. And so you want to put this in the oven anywhere from 25 to 40 minutes. Now I'm going to let it cool out on this towel for approximately a half hour, 45 minutes, and then I'll put it in the refrigerator for at least that time, about an hour, and it needs to cool down about 2 hours total. 3 if you're going to leave it out on the cabinet, 2 in the fridge. But I'm just going to do about half and half, about 45 minutes on the counter, and then maybe another 45 minutes to an hour in the fridge, and it should be ready for a slice. So this is, again, this is Steve, and we'll be back in just a few minutes to cut us a slice of pie and see how it turned out. We'll be back. Thank you for joining in on Hard Times Cafe on YouTube. Hi, this is Steve, Hard Times Cafe on YouTube, and we made a homemade apple pie. It is finally cooled down. We're about to cut the first slice here. And let's see. Okay, now that's a good looking piece of pie. Let's see, we're gonna see how it tastes here. That's good eating. If you want to learn how to make good pie, ask a fat man. It's been Steve, the Hard Times Cafe on YouTube. We'll see you next time.
Ow.